For centuries, we've been taught that the foundations of Western civilization, particularly in ancient Greece and Rome, were built solely by the people of Europe. The narratives we encounter in textbooks, documentaries, and mainstream education paint a picture of a world where Africa played no significant role in shaping the cultures of ancient Greece and Rome. But what if I told you that African influence in these civilizations was not only profound but also undeniable? What if history as we know it has been edited, leaving out a crucial part of the story? Today, we're going to uncover the black influence on ancient Greek and Roman civilizations. We'll look at the evidence from art, literature, military history, and political life, showing how Africa's influence was woven into the very fabric of these powerful empires. Get ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about the history of the ancient world. Let's begin by taking a look at the Greeks, their art, their culture, and their encounters with African civilizations. When we think of ancient Greece, we often think of philosophers like Socrates and Aristotle, soldiers like Alexander the Great, and myths like the Odyssey. But there's an important detail we often overlook. Greeks had extensive contact with African civilizations, particularly Egypt, which was one of the oldest and most advanced civilizations on the planet. From as early as the 6th century BCE, we can find depictions of Africans in Greek art. These are not the stereotypical, degraded representations we're often taught to associate with black people in the ancient world. Instead, early Greek artists admired and respected African people, including figures of African descent in their pottery, sculptures, and writings. One of the earliest depictions is found on a Janur oil vessel dating from between 525 and 475 BCE. This particular vessel shows an African man and a Greek woman, side by side, in a two-faced design, an acknowledgement of the diverse people that the Greeks encountered and interacted with. The presence of African people in Greek art isn't limited to isolated objects either. There are numerous examples, including the famous picture from around 510 BCE, which depicts an African man's head, showing the respect and admiration the Greeks had for African features. But it wasn't just in art that the Greeks acknowledged African presence. It was also in their mythology and historical narratives. Take, for example, the myth of Heracles, the Greek hero who battled the Egyptian king Busiris, an African king. The story, as depicted in the black figure Hydria, from around 510 BCE, paints Heracles fighting against an African king, showing that Africa had an important role in Greek mythical narratives. Similarly, the Attic white ground alabastron, dating back to 4180 BCE, depicts an African man in distinct attire, showing the presence of Africans in everyday Greek life, not just in battles or mythology. As we move forward, let's talk about Rome and how the African presence in European history was not just acknowledged but was vital to the very functioning of the Roman Empire. The Romans had African soldiers, traders, and even emperors who made significant contributions to the empire's growth. One of the most remarkable figures in Roman history was the African general Lucius Quietus, who rose to prominence and fought under Emperor Trajan. Quietus was such a respected figure that at one point, he was considered a possible successor to Trajan himself. But his rise was a threat to the Roman elite, who couldn't bear the idea of an African leading the empire, and so Quietus was assassinated. His name, much like many other African figures in Roman history, was erased from the public consciousness by those in power. How often have you heard of General Quietus in your history classes? Despite the efforts to erase his name, there were other African figures in Roman history who couldn't be ignored. One of them was Emperor Septimius Severus, who was born in what is now Libya. In 193 CE, after the assassination of Emperor Pertinax, Severus rose to power, securing his place as the ruler of the Roman Empire. Under his reign, Rome thrived. He fortified the empire's borders, reformed the military, and cemented his authority. Yet, the contributions of Severus and his African heritage are barely mentioned in mainstream historical narratives. It wasn't just Severus. Another African emperor, Carus, took the throne in 283 CE, after the death of Emperor Numerian. Carus's rise to power challenges the idea that the Roman Empire was a strictly European affair. He wasn't the only one. Numerous emperors and military leaders of African descent played pivotal roles in the Roman Empire. And yet, their stories have been largely suppressed or erased over time. As we dig deeper into Roman history, we also find more evidence of African influence in the daily lives of Romans. African traders played a key role in the Roman economy, moving goods across the empire. Their presence was crucial to the thriving commerce that underpinned the Roman world. African soldiers, too, fought not only in Roman armies but also rose through the ranks to become generals and even emperors. These contributions go largely unmentioned in traditional accounts of Roman history. But the African presence in ancient Europe wasn't just confined to military and political power. It extended to the cultural and intellectual spheres. One of the most significant contributions made by Africans in ancient Europe was in the field of medicine. Al-Zarawi, a Moorish physician from the 10th century, revolutionized surgery. His techniques were so advanced that they remained the primary reference for European surgeons for centuries. He introduced over 200 surgical instruments, many of which are still used in modern medicine today. The Moors, who ruled Spain for centuries, were instrumental in preserving and expanding the knowledge of ancient Greece and Rome, particularly in the fields of science, mathematics, and medicine. They introduced the Arabic numeral system to Europe, replacing the cumbersome Roman numerals. This change revolutionized the way calculations were done and paved the way for the scientific advancements of the Renaissance. The Moors also introduced algebra, a term derived from the Arabic al-jabr, and helped to develop the concept of zero, which is a fundamental element of modern mathematics. So, why is this history not commonly taught in schools? Why are the contributions of Black Africans to European civilization so often omitted from traditional history books? The answer lies in the historical forces of colonization and racial hierarchy, which sought to erase Africa's contributions to global civilization. These forces shaped the way history was written and taught for centuries, casting Africa as a passive land, waiting to be discovered and civilized by European powers. The erasure of African contributions to European civilization wasn't just an accident, it was a deliberate act. By removing the African influence from the narrative, colonial powers sought to justify the enslavement of African people and the exploitation of Africa's resources. If Africa had once been home to powerful civilizations that shaped Europe, the justification for colonization and the transatlantic slave trade would collapse. In recent years, however, historians, scholars, and everyday people are beginning to push back against these Eurocentric narratives. African influence in ancient Greece, Rome, and beyond is finally getting the recognition it deserves. The evidence has always been there, hiding in plain sight, in the artwork, in the architecture, in the writings of ancient historians. It's time we stop letting history be rewritten to fit a particular narrative. The truth is out there, waiting to be uncovered. And as we explore this history together, we can begin to rebuild our understanding of the past, reclaim the stories that have been erased, and honor the African contributions that shaped the ancient world.